So what happened? I got a call. Someone looking for somebody. Personal information. I'm not gonna tell you what they were who they were looking for. And yeah, people are gonna yell at me. My other part saying there's only two genders. There isn't. There's only two. No, even if people say there's only two sex, like you're either born a boy or girl, that's not true either. Sorry, little kids gonna be watching this, but it ain't true either. Because there's another gender that you can, another gender was also an acronym, but it's also a gender that you can be born with. It's called intersex, such as that. So if you're gonna say there's only two genders, what about people that are born with girl and boy parts, which are called intersex? Which is called intersex. So the Caravan. What the heck is a Caravan? Alright, let's get into the book. Chapter 2. The Caravan. What's a caravan? Focus. Chapter 2. The Caravan. Tad knew something was wrong before he'd even opened his eyes. First thing was the sound, a metallic pattering that seemed to be all around him. Frozen peas falling on a tin plate. That was what had woken him up. At the same time, he became aware of the smell. It was a horrible smell, damp and dirty, and the worst thing was that it seemed to be coming from him. He moved slightly, and that was when he knew that something had happened to the bed too. The sheets were wrinkled and nubbed against the skin like old newspaper. And the pillow? Tad opened his eyes. His face was half buried in a pillow, so utterly disgusting that he was almost sick. It was completely shapeless, stuffed with what felt like old rags. It had no pillowcase, and though it might once have been white, it was now stained with dried-up puddles of sweat and saliva. Various shades of yellow and brown. Tad pushed it off his face, gasping for air. If y'all don't know, Tad's pretty wealthy, and that is not a good thing for a rich family member to do. Everything, but it's completely normal. It's still not it's really rude to do it for a rich family for some reason. I don't get why he's so rude. Instead of it being part 1, part 2, I should just have it be chapters, honestly. This part 1 was just a chapter. So if this ends up being just a chapter, it's just going to be chapters. Okay? Aww. He looked up, staring through the gray light, but what he saw made no sense. His brain couldn't take it in. He lay there, unable to move. Instead of the chandelier that should be hanging over his bed, there was a neon tube with a tangle of naked wires twisting out of the broken plastic fitting. The sound of frozen peas, he now realized, was rain hitting the walls and the ceiling. He was lying in a small bed in the corner of a small room, and it had to be a caravan. He could tell from the shape of the walls. There was a window with no curtains, but he couldn't see out because the glass was the frosted sort that you sometimes get in bathrooms or toilets. The room was very cold. Tad drew his legs up in the bed, creaked and groaned. The room was only a little larger than the bed itself, divided from the rest of the caravan by a plastic-covered wall with a door. Something had left some clothes crumbled in the heap on the floor. A pair of torn and soiled jeans poked out from a tangle of t-shirts, socks, and underwear. There were also some comics, a battered ghetto blaster, and a few toys, broken, missing their batteries. so electronic toys. How had he gotten here? Tad tried to think, tried to remember. He had gone to bed like he always did. Nothing had happened. So how? There could only be one answer. He had been kidnapped. I was about to say that, but I said it in my head instead. That had to be it. Someone had broken into Snatchmore Hall, getting past the wall, the moat, the security system, and the dog had jerked him while he was asleep and kidnapped him. Hold on a second. You have a moat, a security system. You have a moat. You have a little wall covering your house, a moat, a security system. I forgot that he had a moat. Like, remember the little bridge? What? He had read about this sort of thing happening. His father would have to pay some money, a ransom, but that was no problem because Sir Hubbard had lots of money, and then he would be allowed to go home. The more Tad thought about it, the more relieved he became. In fact, it was almost exciting. He'd been on a television and all. He'd be on a television and in all the newspapers. Millionaire's son in ransom demand. Boy hero returns home safe. Why would he be called Boy Hero? Boy Hero. That would certainly be something to tell. That would certainly be something to tell them when he got back to school, and when the kidnappers would finally call, as of course they would be. He would have to go to court. He would be the star witness. Tad glanced at his watch, wondering what time it was. The watch was gone. That didn't surprise him. It was a Rolex, solid gold, with a built-in calculator, and color TV. How rich is this dude? His mother had given it to him a year ago to thank him for tidying up his room when Mrs. O'Blimmy was out sick. But it has a built-in TV. I want this watch. The heck? How rich is this dude? So, what? The wretched kidnappers must have taken it. They also seem to have taken his silk pajamas. He was wearing only pants and a black t-shirt that was several sizes too big. They also seem to have taken his silk pajamas. He was wearing only pants and a black t-shirt that was several sizes too big. Tallow with his hand, and raised it again. Was he going crazy? Or was his race thinner than it had been? With an uneasy feeling in his stomach, he closed his short finger and his thumb in the circle around where his watch had once been. They met. Tad began to tremble. How long had he been in the caravan? Could it have been weeks, even months? How had he managed to lose so much weight? Cautiously, he swung himself out of bed. His bare feet came to rest on a carpet so old and dirty that it was impossible to tell what color it had once been. The smell of stale cigarette smoke hung in the air. Tiptoeing one step at a time, he crossed the room, making for the door. The hand was thinner too, just like his wrist, close around the doorknob, and slowly he turned it. The door was unlocked. Tad opened it and stepped into the second room, larger than the first and shrouded in darkness. The room was dominated by a large fold-down bed. He could just make out its shape as his eyes got used to the gloom, and now he realized there was two people inside it, buried beneath a blanket that rose full and fell as they breathed. I need a drink. BRB. Back. One of the figures was snoring loudly. Tabasoy was a woman. Her breath was rattling at the back of her throat like a calf flap in the wind. The man next to her muttered something in his sleep and turned over, dragging the cover with him. The woman, still asleep, groaned and pulled it back again. Tal stepped forward, his foot just missing an empty whiskey bottle on the floor. The wall on the other side of the room was nothing more than this rag curtain hanging on a rail. He had to get to it before the two people, his kidnappers, woke up. He forced himself to take it slowly, making no sound. He was helped at least by the rain. It was coming down more heavily now, striking the metal roof of the caravan, echoing throughout. The noise making the sound of his own footsteps as he edged around the bed. At least he reached the curtain. He patted at the material until he found a gap and, with a sort of relief, passed through. He found himself now in the third and last section of the caravan. It was without a doubt the most disgusting part of all. It was the kitchen, shower, and toilet combined, with all the different articles of those rooms jumbled up together. There were dirty pots and pans stacked up in the shower and used soggy towels next to the sink. A roll of toilet paper had unpulled itself over the oven, and there were 2 grimy bottles of soap, a razor, and a toothbrush on top of the stove. Unwashed plates, thick with food from supper the night before, lay waiting on the shelf over the toilet, while the oven door hung open to reveal 2 washcloths, a sponge shaped like a duck, and a hairbrush that was matted with curling black hair. All the walls and the ceiling were coated with grease, and there were pools of water and more hair on the floor. Todd was amazed that anyone could live like this, but it wasn't his problem. He just wanted to get out. And there was the front door. He was amazed that it wasn't as easy as this. All he had to do was get out the door and run. He would make it to the nearest telephone and call the police. Tad took 1 step forward, and that was when he saw the other boy. The boy was thin and pale and about a year younger than Tad. He had long, fair hair that hung in greasy strands over. He had long, fair hair that hung in greasy strands over a rather stickly-looking face dotted with acne. His right ear was pierced twice with a silver ring and a stud shaped like a crescent moon. The boy could have been handsome. He had bright blue eyes, full lips, and a long, slender neck. But he looked hungry and dirty, and there was something about his expression that was pinched and mean. Right now, he was standing outside the caravan, staring at Ted through a small window. Ted opened his mouth to cry out. The boy did the same, and that was when Tad knew, with a sense of terror, that he wasn't looking at a window. He was looking at a mirror. And it wasn't a boy standing outside the caravan. It was his reflection. It was him. Tad stared at himself in the mirror, watching his mouth open to scream, and he did scream, a scream that wasn't even his voice. His hands grabbed hold of his t-shirt and pulled it away from him as if he could somehow separate himself from the body that was beneath him. His body, him, impossible. Was all this racket then? What's going on? Tad spun around and saw that the curtain had been pulled back. Before him stood a man wearing a pair of stained pajama bottoms but no top. His naked stomach was dangling over the waistband, a nasty rash showing around the belly button. The man's face was pale and bony and covered with a gingery stubble that matched what was left of his hair. His eyes were half closed. One of them had a sty bulging red and swollen under the lid. There was a cigarette dangling from his lips, and Tad realized with a shiver of disgust that he must have slept with it there all night. "Who are you?" Tad gasped. What do you mean who I am? What the devil are you talking about? Please, I want to go home." The man stared at Tad as if he was trying to work him out. Then suddenly he seemed to understand. Slow, nasty smile spread across his face, making the cigarette twitch. You burned out the glue again, he muttered. What? Tad's legs were giving away beneath him. He had to lean against the wall. You have burned the glue again. Then a voice called out from the other side of the curtain. Eric, what is it? It was a woman's voice, loud and shrill. It's Bob. He been sniffing the glue again. I reckon he's in at an old tub full, and now he doesn't know who he is or where he is. Well, slap some sense into him and throw him in the shower, the voice cried out. I want my breakfast. It says I'm, but without an uppercase I and without the apostrophe, so it's M. I'm not Bob, Tad whimpered. There's been a mistake. But before he could go on, the man had grabbed hold of him, one hand closing around his throat. There was a mistake, all right, the man snarled. And what was it? Model airplane glue? Well, you better get your hand in order, you little worm, 'cause it's your turn to wash up and make breakfast. And with that, the man threw Tad roughly into the corner, spat out the cigarette, and went back into the bedroom, drawing the curtain behind him. What? Tad stayed where he was for a long time. His heart was racing so fast that he could hardly breathe. He looked at his hands again, his stomach, his legs. With trembling fingers, he touched his cheeks, his eyebrows, his hair, tugged at the 2 pins in his right ear. He let his hands fall and gazed at his palms. He knew, even without understanding why, that he had never seen those hands before. They weren't his hands. Somehow, something horrible had happened. He had gone to sleep as Tad, but he had woken up as Bob. A few minutes later, the curtain was drawn back and a woman came out. She was one of the ugliest women Tad had ever seen. For a start, she was so fat that the caravan rocked when she moved. Her legs, swathed in black stockings, were thin at the ankles, but thicker than tree trunks by the time they disappeared into her massive exploding bottom. She had arms like hams in a butcher shop, and as for her face, it was so fat that it seemed to have swallowed itself. Her squat nose, narrow eyes, and bright red lips had sunk into flappy folds of flesh. Her hair was black and tightly permed. She wore heavy plastic earrings, a wedding necklace, and a variety of metal bangles, brooches, and rings. Plastic earrings, a wooden necklace, and a variety of metal bangles. She took one look at Tad and shook her head. The earrings rattled. God's truth, she muttered to herself. Then suddenly she lashed out with her foot. Tad cried aloud as her shoe caught him on the hip. All right, you, the woman exclaimed. If you're not going to help, you can clear out. Go out and be sick or something. That'll straighten you out. Please. Tad began getting to his feet. I told you that glue was no good for you. But would you listen? No. You get yourself dressed. The woman snatched a handful of clothes from the top of the fridge and threw them at Tad. Now get out, Bob. I don't want to see you again until you get your act together. No, you don't understand. But the woman had clenched her fist, and Tad realized she didn't want to know. Clutching the clothes, he scrabbled for the door, found the handle, and turned it. Behind the woman, the man had appeared. Now wearing a knit shirt and jeans and smoking a fresh cigarette. He saw what was happening and laughed. You saw him, doll, he called out. Shut up, his wife replied. Tad fell through the door and into his new world. I say that doesn't really sound like a cliffhanger. But yeah, let's just do chapters. Part 1, yeah. So that's the end of chapter 2. Hope you guys enjoyed. Bye. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And while I was reading, I kept on banging my teeth for some reason. Now, what do you guys think is happening? Is Bob being abused? It sounds like that Bob's being abused. That's awful. So, yeah, bye.